this computer. So the role of family and friends in shaping your habits. And I was saying that quite relates to a number of the things that are mentioned on this chapter, particularly the training on chess. Anyway, let's dive right in. The chapter starts with a story about this Hungarian Laszlo Polgar and the experiment that he did. Now, Laszlo was persuaded that there was no such thing as innate talent. And I believe that that is one of the biggest debates we have or that exists, nurture versus nature. Like is a genius born or is a genius educated and trained? And Polgar's idea was that a genius is not born, is educated and trained. And he chose chess as the field where he was going to do these experiments. And well, it's interesting the way that they tell, or that James Clear tells the story, that therefore, given that this was the experiment he wanted to carry out, then he looked for a wife who was going to fit that, and wrote a series of letters to this teacher who also was inclined to the same. Anyway, long story short, of course, they got married, and they were very deliberate in training their children to be chess prodigies. Okay. Yeah. And I was saying that I think I relate to that because I was telling Monica earlier on that I've been coaching my daughter in chess. So of course the thing is, they started very early. You can see that they filled the environment with chess books, with pictures of famous chess players and so on. And by the way, when I was reading about that, even though that is not the gist of this particular chapter, it made me think about environment, okay? Because the environment is something that we have discussed in a previous chapter, especially when we were looking at the veterans that would easily be able to be weaned off hard drugs when they were in a different environment from the war environment, as opposed to, say, the guys that came from rehab and so on. Anyway, environment. But that's not the main story or the main point of this chapter. The main point of this chapter is now, okay, you could still argue it's the environment, but particularly the people that you surround yourself with. So, about the Polgar sisters, they rose to become chess champions. I think at least one of them became a grandmaster. And when you ask them about their lifestyle, they say that it was attractive, even enjoyable. When they did interviews, they said it was entertaining. They didn't view it as grueling. And that may not be your view. I don't know what's your view of chess. It's not necessarily something that looks very exciting, especially for a young person. But for this family, because that was the in thing, if you were a Polgar, then you were a chess player, then it actually turned out attractive and entertaining. So in that way, his theory was then proven, at least in his family, that a genius is not born, but is trained. Of course, there are people that are better in certain skills. For example, you could do your best probably to try and train to be, let's say, a musician, but probably the gift is not there, I think. But the point was for Polgar was that you can actually nurture a talent, even if, or beyond nature, so to speak. So the Polgar sisters grew up in a culture that prioritized chess above all else. So the culture praised them for it, rewarded them for it, and in their world, an obsession with chess was normal. And the key insight there is that when a behavior is normal in your culture, it becomes effortless to maintain. And essentially what that brings us is it brings us to what James Clear calls the tribe. Okay, like I belong to this particular tribe, so to speak. I tend to think that and of course this is a discussion. I think that's one of the things that, for example, Seaton had done well, despite the fact that they were shipwrecked, so to speak. They were calling themselves, if you invested with them, they were Seatonaires, all right? So that kind of thing where you get people to have a sense of belonging, all right? And in the seductive pool of social norms, we are told that, number one, we belong. So again, why this chapter for me is exhilarating is the fact that, for example, they quote from one of my best shows, or one of the shows that I love best, which is GOT. And in fact, from my favorite character in GOT, the Lord Eddard Stark, who said that the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. And he was advising that to his daughter. And she remembered those words many years later, that the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Let me say that this is a quote I love very much. In fact, I even quote it when I'm training on tax, and give the example of that tax law that was defeated by a pack. In this case, the pack being they were who? Red Track, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and so on. In other words, you can do lobbying, for example. Okay, me just speaking my language of tax. But the point is that as humans, we are social beings and we want to belong. That one of the deepest human desires is to belong. Then the other thing is that we imitate. If you look at a young person that, or a young boy or girl, that their earliest habits, they don't exactly choose them. They imitate that which they see being done around them. And that means that social norms become the invisible rules that guide your behavior as you grow. And this is a quotation from Michel de Montaigne, a French philosopher, that the customs and practices of life in society sweep us along. So behaviors are therefore attractive when they help us fit in. And that's, that becomes important because we said one of the ways in which you form a new behavior is to make it attractive. So, and making the behavior attractive, you realize that it is attractive when it helps you fit into your desired or to your chosen tribe, so to speak. Then he says that to imitate 3 groups of people, and I found this quite insightful. That is, number one, the close. That as a general rule, the closer we are to someone, the more likely we are to imitate their habits. Probably that's the reason why they say that couples tend to resemble each other over time. But I definitely know that, I can pick instances where I have imitated those that
You've got mute, Jeremy.
Oh, sorry. So I was saying that we imitate 3 groups of people: the close, the many, and the powerful. And the closer we are to someone, the more likely we are to imitate them. So our friends and family provide invisible peer pressure that pulls us in their direction. Of course, the point there is that you want to then belong. If that's the case, like understanding that, then you want to belong to the kind of people that have the kind of habit or the kind of life that you desire to have. Then the many. And here, it was very interesting. He was telling of an experiment again, which was carried out by a certain professor, where someone comes into a class and they don't know that they are the specimen, so to speak. Everyone else is an actor. And as the class starts, they are given, say, they're given a drawing, and they are asked what it is, and everybody in the class agrees what it is. But then they are given another drawing. And so, for example, let's say you're given the drawing of a cat, and everybody in the class You see, by them, first of all, agreeing with you on the first one, you see, remember, you don't realize that they are actors, and that they are the control, you're the specimen. So by them agreeing with you on the first one, it actually makes you feel that we actually see things the same way with these guys. So when the second drawing comes, then let's say, for example, it's a cat and they say it's a dog, and the more you insist it's a cat, they get irritated and so on. So he was saying that that experiment showed that people tended to agree, like most people tended to agree with now the peers, just so that then they wouldn't be the ones that are saying something that is contrary to the group, even when deep down they knew that what I am saying is not. In other words, they second guessed themselves. And he was saying that the more people that were in the experiment, the more likely it was for someone to be swept along. We said here about being swept along. And that if, for example, it was only one person, then the person in the experiment would be like, I think I'm in class with a dummy, like with a dumb person. But the more people they were, then the more likely it was for the person to second guess themselves. So we imitate the close, we imitate the many, and finally the powerful. And the point there is that many people copy the behavior of successful people because they desire success themselves. And I think that's why, for example, you will find, if it is like a business group somewhere, and you're thinking of who can we invite as a speaker, then you want someone that, say, has made it in business. In other words, you're trying to copy their behavior. So imitate, and powerful, think of it in terms of the person that has the qualities or has achieved the qualities that you desire to have. So if, for example, it's in business, it's a successful entrepreneur. If it is, even if, for example, it is in a particular sport, it will be that someone who has succeeded in that sport is powerful in that sense. And we Clear says that many of our daily habits are imitations of people we admire. So, he gives another example of this guy called Mike Massimino, who joined a class of robotics at MIT. And you're saying that of the 10 people in that class, 4 became astronauts. So the point that James Clear is making is that it is not just, like for you to be an astronaut. Okay, of course, it's MIT, granted. But then the thing is that what is it that makes 40% of them gravitate towards a particular thing? You can tell that there is a sense of peer influence, so to speak. And I know for many of us growing up, peer influence, we were warned against peer influence and told that it is a negative thing. The thing is, it doesn't have to be negative, because peer influence is simply saying that I am influenced by those around me. So can I then surround myself with those that are going to the same place that I'm headed? And that way, their influence on me will be positive, in that it will be reinforcing my journey towards the desired destination. So just a few pointers here, that one of the most effective things you can do to build a better habit is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the norm, all right? The new habits seem achievable when you see others doing them every day. Oh, yeah, and well, a number of examples come to mind, but I think it's also one of the reasons that, for example, exposure is really important. And nothing sustains motivation better than belonging to the tribe. And surround yourself with people who have the habits you want to have. You will rise together. So the identity shift that comes is that previously you were a reader, but then you joined the Inspire Book Club, and now you are a reader. Now we are readers together. And actually, I think, for example, for me, I can just say, if I was to share my personal example, is that I think like the book club is one of the ways in which I have maintained the reading culture. You know, like I know on Wednesday, I'll be meeting up or just signing in to listen, and you find that so to speak, finding my tribe in as far as a reading culture is concerned has helped to reinforce that particular desired behavior. Or you're a musician, then we are a band. And you see, the thing about being a band is that, for example, it means you will have times to meet. It means that you will challenge each other. You will, for example, find ideas and share. You will have challenges together, and the shift then is from individual habit to collective identity. That from you're a cyclist to we cycle, and when the group's identity becomes your identity, the habit becomes inevitable. Okay, I think key takeaways: genius is not born. All right. Okay, of course that's to a degree, but I guess you get the point. Then social norms are invisible rules that guide our behavior. We imitate the habits of the close, the many, and the powerful. Then join a culture where your desired behavior is the norm. Surround yourself with people who have the habits you want, and the shift from I to we. Belong to a group that makes your habits sustainable. Thank you very much. And at that point, I would like to invite any comments, feedback.